So without free consent, you cannot get into a contract or an agreement. But here in this case it says why consent has been obtained by coercion. Here coercion means compelling a person to enter into a contract, that is under pressure or threat. One party A is dominating the will of other party in order to get some benefit or the advantage over the other party. Hi and a warm welcome to you all dear students. I George MA, Commerce Faculty, Vidyashram First Grade College, Mysuru, the Temple of Excellence. Welcome you all dear students for session 3 of Unit 2 Business Laws. Students, this is the last session in this particular unit. Dear students, before going to this particular session 3, let us glance about, or I'll give the highlights of the previous session. That is, in session 2, I explained to you about consideration, the meaning of consideration. That is, consideration means to get something in return. So the meaning of consideration, then I explained to you about the definition of a consideration. Then I explained about what are the factors which are the essential elements of a consideration. Then the exception to the consideration. So students, in this session, let us go for the next topic, that is regarding free consent. Students, let us understand the meaning of free consent. What is free consent? So when two or more persons are said to consent when they agree upon the same thing, in the same sense and as well as at the same time. So free consent means when two or more persons come together and they said to give a consent when they agree upon, right? Is when they agree upon the same thing as well as at the same sense and at the same time. All these three is very, very important. Same thing, same sense and same time. So only when this happens, only when they agree upon these three important terms, that is same thing, same sense and same thing, or same time. Same thing, same sense and same time, then only you can call it as the free consent. So without free consent, you cannot get into a contract or an agreement. So free consent should be there only when you want to enter into a contract. So if you want to enter into a contract, both the parties should have the free consent by saying yes to that particular agreement or the contract what they make, right? Or what they agree upon. So both of them should have that same sense at the same time as well as, that is, in the same thing they should agree upon. So that is called as free consent. So there should not be any kind of under influence, or one person is dominating the other party, one party is dominating the other party, making the will of contract, right? Or it should not be by means of coercion, that is under threat. The person should not make a contract. So if a person is making a contract under threat or under influence, then it cannot be a valid contract, right? So like this, there are misunderstandings, then there should not be misrepresentation, then the contract should not be entered by any of the parties under mistake. So there are so many things where it cannot be called as a free consent. So free consent means it is where two or more parties or the persons who are entering into a contract, they should be having of the same sense, then they should be listening, or they should be of same thing as well as it should be at the same time. So they should agree upon all these three important terms. Now this free consent is being described in section 14. So in section 14, it describes the cases where when the consent is not free. So when the consent is not free, what are the things it happens? That means it lays down that consent is not free when it is caused by coercion. So it may be the consent is not free. When you call the consent is not free, the consent is not free, we say that it is caused by, that is, coercion. Then under influence or undue influence, we say fraud, misrepresentation, etc. So the consent is said to be not a free consent unless, because if there is a coercion or if it is of under influence, or as I said, it is a fraud or misrepresentation, then it cannot be called as a free consent. If all these are there, then it is a not a free concern. Then this it says, if the concern is not free, then what happens? The agreement is voidable. The agreement is avoidable and at the option of the parties whose concern is not free. So here the agreement will not be taken into consideration. It will be avoided. So it will be avoided on the option of the parties who is going to enter into a contract. Now, free consent is one of the important aspect or the elements of a valid contract. Everyone knows that. So only when there is a free consent, it can be a valid contract. Until unless if there is no free consent, then it cannot be the one of the important elements and it cannot be one of the valid contract. Because according to section 10, which provides, it says all agreements are contracts if they are made by free consent of the parties. If all the agreements are said to be the contracts, then it should be of free consent only. Only if there is free consent, then all agreements can be made as a contracts. Now, what are the effects of, that is, the absence of free consent? What will be the effect if there is the absence of free consent? If in the case of absence of free consent, what are the effects? It says, when the consent is not there but it is not free. When there is a consent but it is not free, they want to do something, but that doing something is not freeness. They are not doing it freely. In that case, when it is caused by coercion or undue influence or fraud or misrepresentation, all these are the aspects of not a free consent. The contract is usually voidable at the option of the party whose consent was caused. So here you can avoid such kind of contracts. So such kind of contracts will be avoided, or whom the party is going to make the contract. So next, here you can see the example. X threatens to kill Y. X is a person, the party. He threatens to kill Y, the person, if he does not sell his house to X. So in this case, here threatening is threatening to Y, that is, he has to sell. So Y has to sell his house to X, that is only on threatening. It is not a free concern. He is not going to sell his house with free concern, but with, that is coercion, that is called as threatening or threaten. So Y agrees to sell his house to X. In that case, because he is threatening him, so he is scared of X, so he is going to sell his house to X. But here in this case it says Y consent has been obtained by coercion. Here, how he has got the consent from Y? X has got the consent from Y just by coercion, that is by threatening, and therefore it cannot be rewarded or regarded as a free concern. Therefore, you cannot call this as a free concern because there is a threatening on the life of Y to sell his house from X. Now coming to the other aspects of which is not a free concern. See, coercion. It says, meaning of coercion. Coercion means compelling a person to enter into a contract, that is under pressure or threat. If the party, if A is threatening or is compelling to enter into a contract with him to another party B, that is with threatening or with under pressure, if he makes that particular contract agreement with another party by threatening him or by putting him under pressure, then that is called as coercion. Then according to section 15, contract is said to be called as coercion when it is obtained by committing any of the act which has been forbidden by Indian Penal Code. So if you are committing any kind of act which has been prohibited, which has been restricted by our Indian Penal Act, so then it is not a free concern. It is not a free concern. So it is called as coercion. Then if you are threatening to commit any act, means if a person A is threatening to kill another person, right? And by threatening him, if he gets the agreement done or contract is been made with that person, right? Which is forbidden by Indian Penal Code. So here also under Indian Penal Code, if any of the person is threatening to do something to other party and get his consent for an agreement, then that is also it cannot be entered into valid contract and is called as coercion. Then unlawful detaining of any property without illegally taking the property of others, right? Illegally taking the property of others by threatening him or by doing some acts which has been restricted by the laws, so which is not a legal matter. So accordingly, if you detain any of the property, then it is also called as coercion. Then threatening to detain any property. So if you threaten to detain any of the properties of any others, then it is also under coercion. So here you can see the example. X beats Y and compels him to sell his car for rupees 50,000. So X is a person, is giving him, is slapping or is beating that person Y and asking him to sell his car for rupees 50,000. So in this case, what happens? Y consent has been obtained by coercion. So here Y's consent is not a free consent, it is of coercion, because he is beating him and is thrashing him, and whereby is forcibly is asking him to sell his car for rupees 50,000. So because beating someone is an offense under the Indian Penal Act. So under Indian Penal Act, if you beat somebody, that means if you manhandle somebody, that means under Indian Penal Act or the code, it says you are punishable, and it is an act of punishable, and it is an offense on the part of the party who was manhandling the other person. So a second example you can see here is a Hindu widow of 13 years was forced to adopt a boy under threat. So widow here, she is from past 13 years she is a widow, but they are threatening her to adopt a boy. That is, that her husband's dead body would not be allowed to be removed if she does not adopt the boy. So here they are saying that they are not going to allow to remove the dead body of the husband of that particular widow, and they are asking her to adopt the boy in favor of her. She adopted the boy, her widow's consent has been obtained here by coercion. Here she has adopted, accordingly what they said, she has done it, but it is not of free concern. She has not given the consent freely to adopt that particular boy to make her as a son, but here it is under pressure, under coercion. So because preventing the dead body from being removed for cremation is offense under the section. Second one is undue influence. This is one of the acts. This is also one of the acts where it is not a free concern. What is undue influence? Undue influence means it is a kind of moral coercion. Moral values we say. So it is a moral coercion. So the meaning of the undue influence, it says dominating the will of the other party. So one party is dominating the will of the other person or the party, obtain an unfair advantage. So what they are doing here, one party A is dominating the will of other party in order to get some benefit or the advantage over the other party, right? So here according to the section, it says a contract said to be induced. This particular contract, if they enter into this particular kind of contract, this contract is induced by undue influence. So we can say that this contract is not a free of consent, then the consent is of induced by undue influence. So section 16 defines this undue influence as what? As a contract is said to be induced by an under influence where the relations subsisting between the parties are such that one of the party is in a position to dominate the will of the other party. So here one of the party is able or is having that particular capacity or is in a position where he is going to dominate the will of the other party because of his position and take the advantage of that particular position, right? And take unfair advantage over the other party. So that is the meaning or definition of undue influence. You can see an example and you will be able to understand easily. X advanced rupees 10,000 to his son. He has given advance of rupees 10,000 to his son during this his minority and obtained upon Y's coming of age a bond from Y and 1 lakh. So here there is a misuse of parental influence. So here what happens? He is making an agreement with the minor. Father is making an agreement with the minor where he is paying the amount, lump sum amount, and he is asking him to make a bond saying that I have paid you so and so on this particular day and time. So he is misusing his parental influence. So he is dominating, is dominating the will of the other party because of the position as a father, and he is taking an advantage, unfair advantage from his son. Here, a devotee gifted a property to her spiritual guru. So here, one of the devotee, she has gifted her whole property to one of the spiritual guru or to some of the priest, right? And to secure benefits of her soul. Why she has given a property to the particular spiritual guru? Because in order to get that benefits for her soul in the next world. So when she dies, so in that, at that time, when she dies at that time, she wants some benefit for her soul so that the soul directly goes to heaven. So thinking that she has given all the property to this guru, it was held that spiritual guru was in a position to dominate the will of the devotee. Here, the spiritual guru has made that particular girl in such a way that she has to understand that he has taken this property from her under undue influence. So this is because of whatever the position and the domination which has been done by the spiritual guru in order to take the advantage of the property from her. So this is also an example of undue influence. Now students, coming to the essential meaning and essential meanings of fraud. Let us understand first the meaning of fraud. What is a fraud? Fraud is nothing but the false representation of the fact which is made willfully. Intentionally you have made anything. So if you make any statement intentionally, or if you are deceiving any person intentionally and making him to enter into a contract by that particular statement, then it is a fraud. So in order to deceive the other party, so the term fraud means the false representation. You are making a false representation of the fact which is made willfully with the view to deceive. Because in order to make the other party or to deceive the other party to enter into that particular contract. Now fraud means includes any of the following acts such as committed by any of the party in the contract. What is that? That is with or convenience or by his agent. It may be this particular fraud can be done by the party or by any of his agents, right? With the intention. What is that intention? Why they have committed this kind of fraud? This is committed because in order to deceive the other party, that is another party or through his agents, and to induce him to enter into a contract. In order to enter into a contract, they have induced him. They have induced or persuaded or influenced him to do that particular or to enter into a particular contract. So here, I know that I cannot sell the property of others. That is, I cannot sell the property of my neighbor to one of my friend. But what I do here under this fraud, I make a copy of that particular property deeds in favor of me in my name and I sell it to another person. So that becomes a fraud. That becomes a fraud. So this fraud is a suggestion as to a fact of that which is not true. So it is a suggestion. It may be a suggestion or it may be an act or a fact. But it says which is not of true. It is not true. I told you that I am selling my neighbor's property, making false documents. That is, that property belongs to me and I am selling it to one of the person, to X or Y or to my friend. So that is not true. Actually, that property does not belong to me. In that case, how I can sell that particular property to my friend or to X or somebody person? So it is not true. So by one who does not believe it to be true. So you cannot believe that it is a very true fact. It is not a fact. It is not a true in sense. So X sells to Y local manufactured goods as imported goods. So very nice example. X is selling or is entering into a contract where he is selling the goods to Y which has been locally manufactured, but he is fraudly telling him, the other person, and selling that particular goods as a imported goods. So charging higher prices and it amounts to fraud. So when X is selling to Y the goods which has been locally manufactured or produced and saying him that that particular goods are of imported goods and imported quality, and thereby charging him with higher prices, and thereby he is making a fraud or is committing the fraud. Here fraud has been defined according to section 17 that any of the following acts that is committed to a party contract with the convenience of agent, intention to deceive the party. I told you, intention to deceive the party and therefore or to induce him to enter into a contract. Now, what are the essential elements, right? What are the essential elements for this particular fraud? It says by a party to the contract, by a party to a contract. So, a party here, he has to induce, he will induce a person to enter in contract by means of fraud or by doing fraud. So, here false representation. He is giving a false representation that it is through his knowledge and thereby he makes that particular person to enter into a contract. Representation as to fact, then actually deceived. Here he is actually deceiving the other party because it is not his property or it is not with true intention and totally it is a fraud where it is a crime which is committing, and that is why it says actually he is deceiving the other party to enter into a contract. Then suffered loss. The other party at the end who has entered into the contract with the fraud intention of the other party, that is the promisor, he will be suffering loss when he enters into contracts under fraud. Next we have misrepresentation. This is also one of the acts where it is not of free concern. So the meaning of misrepresentation means what? A false representation. Misrepresentation means it is a false representation. It is a not true representation of fact and it is made innocently of non-disclosure. Here it is been made, this particular statement or this particular act is made innocently without knowing, right? Disclose of material fact without any intention to deceive other party. Here there is no intention in misrepresentation, there is no intention to deceive any other party or to deceive the other party at the other end, right? But this is happening just because of the misrepresentation, because of the innocence or the without the representation of the fact. So here section 18, misrepresentation is a wrong statement of fact. It is a wrong statement of the fact which is been committed by one party and which is made innocently. So here the person is totally innocent. He doesn't know anything about that particular fact, anything about the statement of fact. So he is making the other party to enter in contract with this. So without any intention to deceive the other party here, because he doesn't have any intention as well as he is totally innocent about that particular statement or the agreement or contract. So that is why we say it is a misrepresentation and here he doesn't have any kind of intention to deceive the other party. So it may be caused. How it can be caused then? It can be caused by positive statement, by giving a positive statement that by entering a contract, then breach of duty, that is by coming out of the obligations or not doing the obligation by mistake of regarding the subject matter of the agreement. So these are the three important causes which is being caused by misrepresentation, because of misrepresentation. What are the elements of misrepresentation? There must be representation or omission of material fact. So here the first element says there should be what? A representation or the omission of that particular material fact. Something should have been left out, right? In that particular statement. Omission means deleted or it has been omitted. About the material fact means whatever the subject matter it is. So leaving the subject matter, or you might have omitted the subject matter and you might have entered into a contract. So then the representation or omission of duty must be made in view inducing the party into contract. So here the second element says the representation of the omission of duty must be made with a view. Why you are making this? In order to induce, you are making the other party, you are making or inducing the other party to enter into a contract. Then this particular representation or omission of duty is, it must be inducing the other party to enter into a contract, as I told you. Then the representation must be wrong. Whatever you are representing, it should be a wrong representation, but the party making the representation should not know that it is wrong. So when you make a representation, when you make a statement or representation about that particular subject matter, it should be wrong. That is, it must be a wrong one. But the other party who is listening it or who is entering into contract should not know that it is a wrong representation, right? Next we have mistake. It is also one of the important elements which is not of a free concern. Meaning of mistake, we'll see. It says a mistake is said to have occurred when the party is intending to do one thing by error or do something else. Whenever any of the parties or both the parties who are entering into a contract, if they do some act that is by mistake, that is by doing some error or by committing some error, then it is called as a mistake. Then mistake is an erroneous belief concerning something. Mistake is what? It is an erroneous belief. It is totally belief that it is concerning to something. So this particular mistake, it says when the consent of one or both the parties, when the consent of one or both the parties to the contract is called misconception. So here if any of the parties is doing something by mistake, it is caused by misconception, right? Or erroneous belief, the contract is said to be induced by mistake. So if any of the parties, any one of the parties or both the parties, if that particular parties who are entering into contract and it is caused by misconception or by erroneous belief, then that particular contract is said to be a mistake or which has been induced by mistake. Now mistake may be of following types. Let us see first the mistake of law. What is this mistake of law? If you do any mistake and go against the law, then it is called as mistake of law. So mistake of law of the country, if you make any mistake against the country, then it is the mistake of law of country. This is mistake of foreign law. If you are doing any mistake against the foreign law, then it is a mistake of foreign law. Mistake of private rights to the parties. Private rights of the parties. So if you do any mistakes in case of, that is the private rights of any of the parties, then it is also a mistake, right? Then under this mistake of fact, we have bilateral mistake as well as we have unilateral mistake. So under bilateral mistake, it says mistake as to subject matter. So if you make a mistake on the subject matter of the agreement or the contract, then it is called as one of the bilateral mistakes. Then if you make the mistakes regarding existence, so if any of the mistake is been done on point of view of existence, related to existence, then it is a mistake of bilateral mistake. Then mistake regarding identity. So if you are making any mistake on part of the identity or recognition, then it is a mistake of identity or recognition. Then mistake regarding title. So if you are making a mistake about the title of that particular contract or agreement or the subject matter, it becomes a mistake of title under bilateral mistake. Then mistake regarding price. So if you make a mistake regarding the price quoted, right, or the price, actual price, then it is a mistake of bilateral mistake. Then mistake regarding quality and mistake regarding quantity. So if any mistake is being committed on part of the quality, saying that it is a good quality even though it is a duplicate quality, and if you say it is weighing 10 kgs but it is only of 8 kgs, so that kind of mistakes if you do, that is a mistake of quality and quantity according to bilateral mistakes. Now coming to the mistakes as to the possibility of performance. So as per the possibility of performance, if you do some mistakes, so it is physical impossibility and legal impossibility. These are the two important mistakes which is coming under possibility of performance according to the performance which you make. Then unilateral mistake. These are the mistakes to identify the persons contracted with them. So this kind of mistakes is been happening or it happens, that is in order to identify who are the persons who has entered into your contract. Then the mistake as to nature of contract. So here you are going to make the mistake depending, that is according to the nature of contract. What is nature of contract? That is whatever the contract you are making. So if you do a mistake about that particular nature of contract itself, it is nature of contract. I have explained to you all the points. I'll just brief you once again from the beginning. So let us understand the various terms which comes under this particular session. So first I explained to you about the free concern. That is when two or more parties or persons, if they are said to consent and when they agree upon the same thing at the same time and at the same sense, it is called as free concern. Then the definition said if the concern, whatever the concern is there, if it is not free concern and is caused by coercion, then undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, etc., then this contract is not an agreement. It is not free from the agreement and it is voidable. That is, it can be avoided. Then I explained you about the effects of the absence of free concern. What are the effects will be there in the absence of free concern, right? Then that is, it may be due to threatening. Then the meaning of coercion, I explained to you coercion means compelling somebody, some person, that is to enter into a contract under the pressure or threat. Then I explained to you about the definition of the coercion according to penal code or Indian penal code, that is committing any act which is forbidden by the Indian penal code, then threatening or to commit any act according to forbidden by Indian penal code, then which is unlawfully detaining any of the properties of any person, then threatening to detain any property. So here I give you the examples, 2 examples. Then undue influence, then as I told you, it is a kind of moral coercion. Then the meaning of undue influence, where the other person obtains an unfair advantage of the other, right? That is dominating the will of the other person and thereby taking the unfair advantage from that person by using the position. The definition, example I gave you. Then the fraud, meaning of fraud, false representation of the fact, right? That is, in order to deceive the other party, you made intentionally. Then elements of the fraud, then misrepresentation, that means false representation being made by the parties or any of the parties, that is, which is made innocently without knowing, right, the disclosure or without knowing the fact of the disclosed material fact. So in order to enter the other person to enter into contract, but it is not intentionally, that is without any kind of intention, you are inducing them to enter a contract. So these are the elements of misrepresentation. Then mistakes, what is a mistake? I told you, mistake is nothing but which is occurred where the party is intending to do so by doing something else. So here mistake of law, under that we have mistake of law of country, mistake of foreign law, mistake of private rights of the parties, and the mistake of fact, that is we have bilateral and unilateral mistakes. So here mistake to subject matter, then regarding existence, mistake regarding identity, mistake regarding title, mistake regarding price, mistake regarding quantity as well as quality. Then secondly, mistake as a possibility of performance, that is we have physical as well as illegal impossibilities. And the unilateral mistakes we have, that is mistake in order to identify who was the person who was entered into contract, and mistake as to the nature of contract. So students, hoping that you understood the topics we have covered to you. Take care. Have a nice day. Thank you, students.